Good morning, Vietnam, as they say in those movies. Actually, folks, welcome to the LitRPG Audiobook Podcast. My name is Ray. I'm your humble reviewer, and today I will be reviewing just a very few, because I have a huge list of these things to go through, and I'm going to have to break this up into several episodes. But a few dungeon special books. That's right. This is an all-dungeon, all-the-time show for today. There will be other books next week. We'll take a break from the dungeon. I think I'm going to have to break this up into about 3 specials because there's so many. I tried to figure out how to do this cohesively, and it just did not seem that it was going to work out. It would have been about a 4.5-hour program. And as much as I like to do that for y'all, I'm actually on borrowed time right now as it is. Getting this done. I have a thing in the morning I have to go to for work, and it's going to be very early, and it's getting very late right now, so I'm going to record this, get this in, so I'll probably do some briefer reviews than I normally do. I won't do any singing or dancing or any scary voices. I'm hoping next time I'll do something a little bit more in line with the dungeon special stuff that I did last time. Just like I did with the naughty episode, I like to do silly stuff. Sorry if I don't do that this time around, but as things go, this is the best I can do for you with what I have. But I am sporting, wrong way, see here, my special sound booth theater shirt, but I won't be doing a sound booth spotlight this week. Duh. Okay, so anyway, welcome to the Dungeon Special. I hope you enjoy it. I have a lot of books here to go through, and I'm highlighting just a few of these really quickly. Like I say, I got a big day tomorrow. Continuing educations all day, and I don't have time to go 3 hours in recording and then retyping everything. So I probably won't even have my typed notes up. This is going to be me winging it 100%, going by memory from here on out. So, again, thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoy the show. The Dungeon Special. Okay, well, the first book I'm going to be reviewing is Dungeon Wars Book 1 by Jeffrey Falconlogue. Is that a falcon? It sounds more like a chicken. I'm sorry. Caw. Yeah, I can't do it. Anyway, it's narrated by Cody Roberts with a book length of 10 hours and 36 minutes.
Indeed, dungeons possess the strange ability of using their mana to merge with the ground around it, acting similarly to how a golem's crystal works. The dungeon heart crystal uses its mana to create an outer shell to protect its core, the outer shell being a dungeon instead of a golem's body. Indeed, the two crystals appear somehow related, as the legendary golem dungeon in the Grey Orcs territory holds within its moving body a legendary dungeon. Without digressing further, this ability is normally limited by the size of the heart crystal. When a dungeon begins to spread and absorb the surface, it is classified as corrupted because the unlimited making of monsters destroys everything in the area as its influence grows. Corrupted bits of land take years to recover any form of viability, and large swaths of dead land still dot parts of Palos.
So here is a series in which the Falcon, as in Jeffrey Falconlogue, kind of swoops in and wipes out in one fell swoop, as he swooped in, the very thing that he created. And as the godfather of the dungeon genre, I'm pretty impressed. I'm very impressed. So you're asking me, what the hell am I talking about? Well, Jeffrey Falconlogue did something very brave with this new series, Dungeon Wars. Dungeon Wars basically is a continuation of the Slime Dungeon series, but he does something that you don't normally see when you instead of just saying, okay, we're going to do book 5 and 7 and 10 out of this one series, the Slime Dungeon series, he takes this in a completely new direction. He basically ended his Slime Dungeon series and pulled a slick reboot. He has stripped away everything, and I mean everything that he could, and then streamlined his idea into the bare essentials. You don't see this work very often in novels. I mean, it happens on TV, and occasionally, there'll be a series that's been on for a while, like after 5 years, they try to overhaul it or something. Sometimes in a long series of movies, like the Fast and Furious franchise, like, I don't know why it was just done this early, but you had 2 Fast and Furious movies, and then you had Tokyo Drift, which kept the concept but totally destroyed everything else. So it was kind of stupid how they do that. And then later on, they add in Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, so there's conflict between him and Vin Diesel in real life, because that makes it more fun to do filming. But anyway, the point comes down to it is that it doesn't really work very often. It really doesn't. Often the creator is the reason why it doesn't work. In an effort to revitalize and give some new life into their series, they kind of pull the heart out of their tail and end up losing it on the operating table. They just kind of kill their story. Not Logue. Logue here, how do I put this? He works really, really hard to kind of recreate the old magic, but still instill, and try saying that pretty fast 3 or 4 times, still instill some new life into his book. The new slimes really work. And I'll say it like this: he creates new slime monsters in the new location he goes to, because what happens is, I think it was pretty smooth the way he built the mobs and painstakingly put together, his floors 1 brick at a time. Basically, he had to. He was low on power and didn't have much choice. But the important thing to note, and I can't stress this enough, is how Logue makes all the right decisions. The book feels fresh and new while familiar. It also had that new car smell, and I think it really works that way. Because basically, what he does is, if you remember in the Slime Dungeon, the last book that came out, there was a bit of an event at the end, and all hell kind of broke loose, sort of literally, and something happens, and you don't know what happens to the dungeon, the slimes, and so on and so forth. And here, we end up getting the answers to what happened there. But it's not something you expect, because it really, really has a devastating impact on Doc and company, when they finally arrive into a new location. Because Doc is not 100% when he arrives. He's not doing well, and it's a struggle for him to just make it the first little while where he's at. He's pretty much on his own. He has no one there to help him. His companion is missing. His friends are missing. So he's starting from scratch in a place where he's got basically no power, no strength, no knowledge of what's around him whatsoever, and he really has to work hard and think. And that's where a lot of the greatness of the book comes in, because you still have all the stuff that came before it, but you also now have a new situation, new adversaries, new dangers, plus the old dangers are still out there. They have to consider that as a fact. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on that, if it had just been a continuation, I don't think it would have worked as well. So I think Jeffrey Logue really wisely made changes and did the right kind of changes. Now, Cody Roberts, the narrator, what I will say is I don't think, how do I put this? I don't think that he does anything new or invigorating, but he brings his game face. He brings a really good game face. And he works really hard to keep everything on an even keel. So even though it's new, you've got that rock solid, this is what we've had, nothing has really changed. And I mean it in a good way. It's a comforting, it's like, these are grandma's cookies. These are the cookies that you've had your whole life, and they are delicious, even though you're eating them at your Aunt Sally's house. Okay? So, Aunt Sally. Oh, that woman. Anyway, he really provides a very solid performance that keeps your attention and makes you feel the distress of the dungeon as, the whole thing goes, as a whole. It's the entirety of the people, the slimes, the dungeon himself, Doc. He keeps it all there. And again, when I say he doesn't bring anything, like he doesn't reinvigorate, well, I'm going to say he reinvigorates the dungeon cast. Like I said, I can't say he had fun, because he didn't do anything groundbreaking or new, but he brought new life into the cast, if that makes sense, So I just said anything new, but he does bring you some new life. I mean, there's changes that take place amongst the slimes that he helps bring to life, and he does a really good job of it. But it's the same job he did before. I mean, he's just a rock solid. You can count on him to do his performance and get through it. So again, I think this was a really good book, and it was a really smart start to a new series. The Dungeon Wars book actually has, I don't know how to say this, it's got a lot of potential, very, very much potential to make big changes and be ground shaking in its efforts to kind of bring new life into this series. There's a lot of ways it can go. I'm kind of curious as to see how it goes, where it heads, and who is the ones who survive. Because, this is one of those things where it could happen. There's no guarantee because Doc is low on power. Overall, it was a smart move. I think that this is not just a continuation of a familiar story. It's a reboot without tearing anything down that was really important. Seriously, I think that DC Comics needs to take a page from his book and learn a lesson from how Jeffrey Loeb does this, because DC has had numerous restarts. Like if you go back to Crisis on Infinite Earths, and then Final Crisis, and Flashpoint, and they reboot every 2 years now. It seems like the New 52. They have lost, Crisis on Infinite Earths kept the heart of the DC universe and had just a few little snaggles here or there. After that, everything they did, it just got worse and messier and less interesting. And yeah, I'm a comic book buff. And I think Logue really could give them a couple pointers on how to reboot without destroying the heart of your stories and characters, because he does it. He does it really, really well. I think it's pretty slick and smart in the manner that he handles it. So I enjoyed the book. I think it was daring, because I don't know if I would have the balls to do such a thing. But anyway, it was pretty daring, and I'm going to give it a final score of 8.4 stars, because it does really improve, I think, the storyline. And unlike other stories, that continue on into books 5, 6, 7, 8, and they kind of lose their way after book 3. That's why I'm a big fan of trilogies, and I really think that, for example, just Hondo Jenks, Dan the Barbarian, it's killing me that book 4 is the last book, but on the other hand, I think it's a wise move. He's done his story, he's told the story he needs to tell, and it needs to kind of round out where it's at. Here, Loeb gets to keep playing in his toy box without, having to retread his car. Rather than doing that, he's rebuilt the car from the body up, and it makes it much better and more interesting. So, pretty smooth, 8.4 stars. I really recommend it. Okay, so the next book is Dungeon Deposed, Book 2, Dos Equis. Dos cervezas? I'm trying to learn Espanol stuff. Estoy aprendiendo español. How's that sound? Anyway, Dungeon Deposed Book 2 by William D. Rand, an amazing author, narrated by Andrea Parsnow. This is Book 2 of the Dungeon Deposed series, with a book length of 13 hours and 13 minutes. What lucky numbers those are.
Standing in the middle of her temple, the seat of her power and her pattern, was Robin. Bright gold luminescent wings spread out from her back. Her eyes glowed with an unearthly light, and her blade seemed to be fashioned from fire. "I think she took your sign very literally, and is more than willing to act the part," Maribel said. "It also fits the rules quite well. Wynne will approve, as I do. You made a choice. And a promise." Smirking, Riker checked the sign one more time to make sure it got his point across. "All who cross this point shall be judged at the highest levels and inspected with utmost scrutiny. The likelihood of death is almost a guarantee. Rewards will be minimal, except for the gift of knowing your own strength and the promise of learning new skills and abilities. Those who enter will suffer the wrath of dungeon for the attempt to exterminate it. Do not enter.
Now, I really wasn't kidding when I said what lucky numbers those are. 13 has always been my lucky number in life. Anything I've ever done, if I've signed up or been the 13th person, I have succeeded at it. It's almost a guarantee. If I'm number 13, I have it in the bag. Did the mile swim when I was a kid. Number 13, boom, knocked out of the park. Tried out for plays. Every time I signed up for number 13, I got the part. You name it, number 13 has always been lucky. So 13 hours or 13 minutes, I got really jazzed to see this come up. So the first thing I want to talk about is, well, it's going to have to be Andrea Parsnow. As much as this is about William D. Rand and how great he is, I do have to just kind of digress and just say, first of all, Andrea is an amazing narrator, and I just can't get over how good she is from book to book and how she carries everything on her shoulders, because this book or the next book lives or dies by her words. Because I don't care how good the story is, this is an audiobook, and the narration is key. She really, really does an amazing job here. And I have to say, one of my biggest complaints about book one was that I felt that her voice that she had used for Riker, the main character, was whiny and snivelly. I know I said snivelly. He sounded snivelly. And, in fact, I just got done listening to Dan the Barbarian Book 4, and Riker's snivelly voice reappeared in that book, being used by an assassin. And it fit that character so well. The assassin, because he was just a creepy guy, and the little voice that she did really, really was meant for him. And, I think Andrea took it to heart, because she had actually talked, as far as I know, because if you listen to the story, Rand literally says, some people just need to get over, certain things. And I don't know if he was talking to me, because I don't know if she went there just because of me, or if other people had said something, but I know that I had voiced, I didn't think my belief that the voice that she had used did not correlate to the character that he was. And it was just kind of an offhand thing. I said, if I have to pick something to say negative about it, but she had to literally go on to him and said something, because Riker, out of the blue, just kind of comes up and says, hey, to his goddess, or not to his god, but anyway, he comes up and he says, I need to get my voice to sound more manly. Can you make me more manly? And it really happens. And that's where Rand kind of goes off into this little 2-paragraph rant, I think. So if it was my fault, I apologize if you liked that voice. And if you didn't, then I'm still going to apologize, because that was not my intent. I think Andrea is amazing, and she really kills these characters. I mean, she, like I say all the time, I can't say enough good stuff about Andrea Parsnow. She is just an incredible narrator. Top to bottom, everything she does is 100% all the way in. She never gives a half performance or a 3/4 performance or even a 99% performance. She's like, she'll fill up a cup and have water spill over the sides just to prove she can give 110% into everything she does. That's how good she is. So, here she just really, really impresses me. And again, she keeps your attention with the characters. So I just wanted to get that out of the way and just kind of just say how good she is, and I hope that wasn't my fault. But again, I don't think I have that kind of weight. I don't carry that kind of, well, I do have weight. I just don't have that kind of power to do something like that. But again, Andrea is just amazing, and so she really, really helps this book come to life. Now, as for the story, I think that it's a good story, but there was one bit of it that kind of drug out. And my problem is that we have, and this is where I always get kind of flustered, is there's points where the characters are split up into different areas. And to me, splitting your characters up, it kind of weakens the story. If you can do it and do it right, then that's great. But most times, they're trying to communicate, or they're trying to get to that person, and there's always some sort of struggle to go back and forth, and it just makes it unnecessary. And in fact, there's a point in the book where Riker has to get some of his ladies back home, and in order to do so, he's got to go through the Church of Light and the Church of Dark, and it's a really big mess. And as inventive as it is and creative as it is, that part, the run from here to there, did not work for me on the whole. I was uncaptivated, and I kind of said, I know what's going to happen here. We're going to have, 6 chapters of them on the run and them getting to know each other and things like this. And it just wasn't what I was looking for. I wanted a more cohesive, this is what happens from here to here story as the city of Dungeon comes under assault from the different forces. Because if you remember, the Church of Darkness and the Church of Light were kind of sniffing around last time, and here it begins to come to a head, and Riker has to do his best to do things even though he is not where he needs to be. And so it's kind of hard for him to accomplish certain goals. But again, the story is interesting, and it's good. And again, I do like the character of Riker a lot, because he's one of those guys that he existed solely for revenge. And revenge is a dish best served with salsa on the side. Okay? Little guac and salsa. It's just perfect. That's how I like my revenge. I don't like it cold, because cold is just, meh. I like my food steaming hot, but I don't want like Tabasco sauce hot, or jalapeno hot, or even, ghost pepper hot. I just want a little guac and a little taco sauce, or whatever you want to add on the thing there. I just enjoy. That's how I like my revenge, and I always get my revenge. So if you're thinking about making me an enemy, just reconsider now. I'm being kind and telling you that. Anyway, Riker existed just for the purpose of getting revenge on those people who had wronged him, or at least he felt that they had wronged him in life. And I always say, just because you're an a-hole doesn't mean that you're, you are not eligible for death just because you're a jerk, okay? Being a dick doesn't equate to you having to die, because there are a lot of people in life who are total asses, and they manage to not get killed by anybody. But in this case, I get it, and I understand it, and it's a good motivation for a character. And so I liked that, he had this goal in mind, because, he was a one-pump chump, and he ends up getting some power, and he's now able to, show the world what he's really capable of. And that is where, the story really shines, is where he's showing another one of the ladies, how he uses magic and how she can do the same thing, and he kind of makes her an apprentice, and that is where the story really bloomed for me. I really thought that was the best part of the whole book, because it really did come together, and it just kind of capped off the perfection of how he has gone from being this, I'm just going to go get everybody, to actually being a man, and he's going to show this young lady how to protect herself and make herself stronger. And by doing that together, they actually become more powerful together than they are apart. And so, that's what the story should be about, is the entire harem of ladies he has, kind of working in unison and helping him and them get through this whole process. And that's why I say I don't like it when it's split up, because splitting them up just did not work for me. And as much as it should have, that's where I just kind of got lost. But anyway, the story is really good. The character of Riker is really interesting. There are other characters in the story, the ladies, that I do enjoy. The one that he has to go and rescue, that's probably my least favorite character of the bunch, which is ironic, because I just kept thinking, well, if she dies, and we have the other people here. So, that was just the way I looked at it. But the story is really good still, and this is probably, I don't think it works as well as the first book. Just because the first book was really, really slick and smart, and there was a whole point to Riker and the way he did things. And this kind of shifted everything. And like I said, I like the direction he's going in, but the whole somebody's over here and we've got to get back to here thing and the race to do it just kind of didn't gel in my mind. And again, that's just me. I'm sure there's other people that thought, hey, this is just brilliant and I love this whole thing. And that's your prerogative to think that way. But here it just did not happen for me. I did not connect to it. But I will say it's an 8-point book, 8 stars, 8.0 stars. It's an 8-star book. It's good, it's enjoyable, and I think that it has a lot of potential. And I'm pretty certain I know who the guy in the north is. I have an idea just because of the kids and things like that, and the way things are working. I think I know who the guy in the north is, but I'm holding my breath, and I don't want to say I took a guess, because if I take a guess and I'm wrong, then I have no validity here anymore whatsoever. But I'm just saying, yeah, runner. I think that's who it's going to be. But again, that's just my speculation. If you can get past that, I don't want to spoil it or anything, but that's my speculation as to who that is. And I could be totally wrong. I totally can be, because I have no clue. I don't have the third audiobook, and I do not know who it is for certain. It could just be some really powerful cat. But I think that this is where he's starting to knit his worlds together some. And if you've read Fostering Faust, you can see that there's a lot of stuff happening there that kind of shows that things are working together. Super sales on superheroes. Book 3, things started to come together a bit more. We have Wild Waste and super sales almost merging into a singular point. You can tell things are starting to happen in the Randverse. So, yeah, things are going to have to start kicking into gear. So that's why I think that. Again, I can be totally wrong. I don't know everything, and I'm sure as hell not going to tell you I know anything. So, anyway, 8-point star book. I think it's good. Andrea Parsnow kills it. God bless Andrea, because she is just an amazing narrator, and we are lucky to have her. And the same with William. I think Rand does an amazing job 99% of the time. I don't think I've ever read a book I didn't love. And like I say, when I say this is probably weaker than the first one, I still enjoyed the book. Still enjoyed it, and I still think it's a good book. I just think it's just probably not to the level the first one was. But that's because of the way the story flowed in my mind. I think it was a little disjointed. But that's just the way I looked at it. So 8.0 stars, but it's a good one. Okay, well, next up is Dungeon Crawl, The Crucible Shard, Book 1 by Skylar Grant, narrated by Doug Teasdale Jr., with a book length of 4 hours and 52 minutes.
The Colosseum had become a killing field. Down below, gladiators and beasts fought for their lives, while giant screens focused upon the best moments. It was tournament day in Piper's Mill. It was the day we got to see legends firsthand, the day our best and brightest competed to join their ranks. My brother Tommy was down there in that melee, a man and a trident against the world. As family, I was in the VIP section, although my interface wasn't nearly so grand as most. There were those connecting from the city, and our special celebrity guests who had come to witness the competition personally. They were indulging in full sensory, lounging with glasses of wine, and sampling artfully prepared treats as they watched. Sadly, my connection was strictly visual and audio, as it was for any locals apart from the competitors. In cordoned-off areas of the party, the most dramatic scenes from below were reenacted, as if the spectators were in the heart of the action.
Well, I'm always the first guy to say what really matters to me is the story, and I'm a big, short story kind of guy. This isn't a bad book for a quick listen, 4 hours, 52 minutes, so it's under 5 hours, not by much, but it's under a 5-hour book. And the story is interesting to a certain degree, but I will say I don't think it's nothing that you won't have ever kind of seen or listened to before. A lot of it's tropey stuff. For example, there is a character who is living in a slummy world. His brother wins a championship, and just as he's about to be able to go and take care of some shady business, he gets hurt and he can't go, but he has his twin brother step up to the plate and go in. It's almost like Avatar, how the one brother gets killed, so they have to have the twin brother kind of come in and take over the Avatar thing. Well, it's the same thing here. He's close enough genetically for them to get him into this underworldish kind of skeezy game that you're not supposed to play. It's illegal. So he's going in knowing that if he gets caught, he's going to ruin his reputation or his brother's, or I don't know how it's going to work. And he's not going in alone. He's going in with two other people, a guy that's a wizard, and then there's a thief. And they both have issues. In fact, everybody in the whole book has issues, which is fine. But, for example, the thief, she used to be like a supreme gamer. And just so you know, in this book, in the regular world, gamers are just like as famous as any athlete that's out there today, So, they're like Terry Bradshaw and Lynn Swan and Willie Stargell. That's the last time I actually cared about sports, if you know those guys' names. Roberto Clemente. Does that tell you how old I am? Anyway, going backwards, for example, the rogue, she was hurt in real life, and so now she's just struggling to put herself into a position where she can prove that she's still capable, because for some reason, even though you're in a game, your physical handicaps translate over. I don't understand that at all, but that's fine. They're working through it, and the wizard has his own agenda, and the MC, I want to say, I don't know what he was really there for, because he really was just a body to get them into that game. Other than that, he really didn't have much personality or backstory. Basically, the more interesting person was his brother, who ended up not being able to enter the game, and this one, he kind of lucks his way through things and survives periodically, just through luck. I mean, it's just that, he does do things somewhat smartly. He is not a bad gamer, but I don't think he's an interesting character to start with. And it switches POV a few times, so sometimes you have to keep up with who's doing what and why they're doing things, and so on and so forth. The main character, and I can't even remember his name, I'm sorry, and like I said, this is one of my rush through the whole thing tonight kind of deals. He ends up like accruing like a near harem, because the AI takes the form of some goddess of fire and lust or something along those lines, and she wants him, but he can't have her, or he wants her, but he can't have her, because if he does, she'll destroy him, she'll burn him up, and he won't be able to survive their contact. So he ends up sleeping with a spider chick who, if this makes sense, I like spiders. Okay, I'm a big spider fan. Spiders and snakes. That song, I don't like spiders and snakes. Well, I do. I like both those things, and I'm always up for good spider stories. Well, there's in this dungeon they're going through. There's a part where the royals were forced to flee an area, and they left their daughter behind, and she ended up being raised by spiders. Now, I don't even get the concept of that, but she becomes the spider queen, and so she's got spiders in her body, on her body. She's just kind of like Morticia Addams with spiders, and the MC hooks up with her. So there's a lot of stuff, and I'm not trying to spoil things. I'm just laying this all out. A lot of things that happen in the book that kind of start to tell a good story, and it kind of ends because the book is very short. Here's the setup, we get you in, and then we have the premise begin to take fruition, like with the goddess, and then the book just cuts short. It stops. And I get that a lot of it was just kind of setting up plot lines and hooks for you to enjoy, but if the book had been longer, even by about 3 hours, I think it would have been a much better story. Doug Teasdale Jr., I'm one of these guys that I'm on the fence. I hear a lot of people talking about how great they think he is. I don't think he's a bad narrator, and I don't have a problem with him. I'm not blown away by him. I don't go, oh my gosh, he just killed this book. I think that he does play it pretty well here, though. I think that he handles the rogue and her past inequities and damages, because she's a broken lady. Let's just be honest with it. She's very broken. He deals with her pretty well. And that the same with the spider and the goddess. I think so. He can handle female voices, and he does get to show the strain and the pain that they've been through, and the MC and all that. So I mean, he does do a good job. He does do a good job on the voices, but I'm just not overwhelmed by him. I think that he's just a decent narrator. You know, he's bottom top tier. He's not mediocre by any stretch, but he's not like top 10 or top 15 for me if I go through my narration list. I think he's probably in there, but he's not way up on the list, not nearly close up. And again, that's just me. I mean, I know people that I've heard who've said he's just fantastic. And if you like him, great. I think he's right there for you, and he's perfect for it, because he does do a good job. But he just didn't overwhelm me with his words and the way he spoke them. So my final score, and again, I hate to say it like this, the book is short, and I'm usually a big fan of a proponent of short books, but under 5 hours, it doesn't really get into the detail I think it should, so it kind of cuts us short. I think that I kind of missed out on some things that we could have had, but again, if it's setting up more stuff in the future and the books are longer, then it all comes out in the wash and it's worth it. But for me right now, it's a 7.6 stars. Okay, so the next book, and probably the last one for the show, is Dungeon World, a Dungeon Core Experience by Jonathan Brooks, narrated by Miles Mealy. And I know I'm going to mess that up. I just can't pronounce it. Meili. Mealy, with a book length of 9 hours and 17 minutes.
Fred woke up slowly, confusion marring any of his attempts to figure out where he was. Am I back at Regnark's place? He felt the cold seeping into his back and legs through his clothes. On second thought, I doubt it would be this cold. He opened his eyes and noticed that it was dark, the night sky full of little points of light just barely visible. He could see just fine, of course, because of his enhanced dark vision, but the confusion only deepened. He sat up gingerly, memories of the last few moments before unconsciousness filtering through his mind finally. Where he was expecting to feel some pain in perhaps his neck or head, there was instead nothing. A quick look at his mana totals showed that they hadn't increased at all, which meant that anything converted had been automatically used to do something else. I'm going to guess healing me. How long was I out?
So, let me just say, Jonathan Brooks really kind of amazes me on a couple of different levels. First off, the guy just kind of came out of nowhere and just blew out like a dozen dungeon books, is what it seems like, in no time at all. And then, after he did that, he put out like a dozen dungeon audiobooks in no time at all. He has wasted literally no time in getting his work out into the public, and I really respect that, because I not only had I finished Dungeon World 1, then I ended up getting book 2, and then I've got probably like 4 or 5 other books of his that I've listened to, and this is why he's half the reason why I'm going to have to split this show up into 3 different segments. And the next ones I'll do a little bit more with you. I really promise. I'll do my silliness and have the stupid wigs and the hoods and stuff like that, and I'll do the voices. But he's half the reason why, because he's got like so many dungeon books out that it's impossible for me to just do, because if I just did on his stuff alone, I would have a 3-hour series episode on this, because he's just got so much out there. And again, the bad news for me is that so far I've liked everything I've listened to. He actually tells a really good dungeon story, and I will put like Dungeon World right up with like Jeffrey Falcon Logue and Dakota Kraut when it comes down to it, because this is the first book of his I read. And this is probably like my favorite series that he's done so far, just because it's very different and it's original. And I'm thinking it's because it's so different, but it's still within the realm of the genre, that it actually deserves a lot of credit for being brave and innovative and changing ideas and concepts of what it is to be a dungeon. Just in the same way, like with Dungeon Deposed Book 1, William Moran took it and just said, hey, look, you don't have to actually be the core. As long as you have the core, you can build a dungeon. And that was new, and it was innovative, and I appreciated it, and I think that worked really well. And I'm going to say the same thing here, without doing very many spoilers, because you'll note as soon as you get into the story, the main character, Fred, and I'm not going to be able to get his last name in, so from this point forth, he'll just be Fred Fredburger. Fred Fredburger. That was for you Billy and Mandy fans out there, if you ever watch Billy and Mandy. Just remember, Dracula doesn't suck blood. Dracula scrapes and licks, okay? That's Billy and Mandy joke. Anyway, I'm going back into it. But Fred is the offspring of two different dungeon cores that are very much not supposed to be together, let alone creating offspring. And Fred is kind of an anomaly in that he's somewhat human and somewhat dungeon. And he really doesn't have a clue what life is like, how he's supposed to react. He was kind of very sheltered for very good reasons by his parents from the outside world. And Fred finds one day that he has to kind of leave the nest. I'm not going to go into why or what happens, but it's a very sad event. And he goes out into the real world for the first time to find out what it's like to actually be a sapient being and how to survive. And he kind of comes to realize that he's not like other people in the very many things that he does. For example, he's nearly indestructible physically. I won't say that he is indestructible, but he comes damn close to it. He can kind of rebuild himself from scratch almost from anything that happens to him. So he's got that going on, which is a plus. But even though he has a dungeon core, he can't start his own dungeon, and he doesn't know why. He ends up getting a companion, which is like a big wolf, but it's not the kind of companion he really wants. There's a reason why that while the wolf is a really great piece for him, he would really rather not have the wolf. He'd rather have the other things instead. So again, I'm not going spoilers. But as Fred goes into the world, he lucks into a couple of different things. He finds a very helpful gentleman to get him through his first few months of living, to kind of show him what it is to live and how to live and what things are, like money and food and all that stuff, because Fred had just kind of subsisted on bland manna, like little manna pellets or whatever you want to call it, manna soup that his mother had made for him. And while it sustains him, it's not the same as regular food. I mean, if you think about it, would you have a glass of water that kept you alive and kept you sated, but would you rather have the hamburger? I mean, seriously. I mean, a glass of water is nice, but it's not where you go, that was some good water. I mean, look at me. Do I look like I would take water over a hamburger? No. No. And that's where the whole story of Fred is very interesting, because you kind of get to see him transition from being this naive young man to being this naive adventurer. So, and what he ends up doing is he does go in and he makes a friend eventually after he leaves the first gentleman. And he decides to become an adventurer. Now, the nice thing with Fred is he's got all kinds of bonus powers because he is a dungeon. For example, he can create things. If he understands it, he can replicate it. So, in some ways, money is not a problem for Fred anymore, because he can just mass produce gold or silver or platinum on a whim. Now, of course, he can't do it all at once because he doesn't have the access to that sort of coin. So, he has to do it step by step and kind of figure things out, because he can't just make gold out of thin air because he's never touched gold before or that kind of coin before. So he has to actually physically examine something and completely understand it before he can replicate it. But once he does that, pow, he's got that in there. And he can kind of see magic and make changes in his mind with how to make things work. Excuse me. So he's got a lot of different abilities and that just kind of captivate you as a character, because that makes his potential so much more. I mean, there's just so much more that Fred is capable of in the future. And of course, like with book 2, that's very, very much evident. But in this case, Fred kind of does eventually learn how or why he couldn't create a dungeon before, and he does start his own dungeon, so to speak. He starts his own guild, and of course, when you're able to pay everybody like 100 gold a week for no reason, everybody wants to join your guild. So he has a lot of stuff happening that's going really well for him. But at the same time, it's a book, and so bad stuff has to come up and occur. And this is where I say Brooks really balances out the character with the story really well. I mean, Fred is interesting, and he pretty much gives you the whole story. Excuse me, I'm getting really thirsty here. From his perspective. And Fred is somebody that you don't mind listening to tell you the tale and seeing things happen. And the other characters are there as well. Like, there's an adventuress that no one wants to touch because she's bad luck. And he just kind of says, well, I mean, hell, I'll do it. I'll go with you. And they start a friendship because he's not only very skilled, but he's also very powerful. And they kind of make their way doing what they're supposed to do as adventurers. And him becoming an adventurer is an event unto itself because things happen to him because of his nature. And again, I can't do spoilers, but like I say, Brooks really tells a great tale. And having already read book 2, or I should say listened to it, I know it gets better as the story continues, because book 1 is great, book 2 is even better. But I'm not going to go into book 2. This is just about book 1. It's just a very good, new, fresh take on the dungeon genre. I'll go back to Geoffrey Falcon Logue. Geoffrey Falcon Logue is kind of the godfather. I think he had his print book out like a month before Dakota Kraut. So I'm going to say he's like the godfather of the dungeon genre because, he had it out there first. And Dakota had the audiobook out a month before he did. It's kind of backwards on how they did that. But technically, they're both the godfathers of the genre. But either way, Geoffrey basically stripped away everything about his original story and rebooted himself. And here, Brooks very wisely reconstructs the genre from the ground up so that he doesn't have to do that, because Fred is a fascinating character. His powers, his personality, and again, his naivete is really well played. That's one of those things where it can get really stupid in some spots. Like, if you're a Star Trek fan, Next Generation, there are points where Data is just fascinating as this Pinocchio type guy. He's just fascinated by humans. He wants to be a human. And then there's other points where he's doing dreams, and it just gets really stupid, and it doesn't work as well. Or when he gets in the motion chip, it just kind of takes away from the character. And that sort of thing is a delicate balance, because naive is what Data did best. He's trying to understand humans. Like, there's a scene in, I think, Deja Q, where Q gives a parting gift to Data, where Data bursts out laughing, and he laughs for a solid 30 seconds, and he just kind of stops cold, and then it's gone. And that was a really great thumbprint of Data, because he got to experience something, and then he didn't understand a damn thing that happened to him. And he didn't know anything about what occurred because it was new, and he had to digest it. And as smart as he was, and as fast as his calculations became, he still couldn't process what had occurred. And that is really Fred in a nutshell. Fred has a lot of things that everybody else takes for granted. He just does not understand. And so he becomes this eccentric millionaire to the people that know him. And it kind of works really well for his guild people, because they're just well, we don't care. He's eccentric. He's a millionaire. He's got bazillions of dollars. He's Scrooge McDuck. We don't care what he wants to do as long as he's not hurting us and he's helping. This cat can help us in any way he wants as long as he's shoving gold down our pants every other week. That didn't come out right. I'm sorry. Anyway, Brooks does really weave a good story, and it really made me want to know what happened next. So, of course, when I got book 2, I almost jumped right into it immediately. I didn't, because I just started another book when I got the other book. So I had to finish that one first. And, of course, I was trying to cram in all kinds of dungeon stories before I could do the show. And I've been putting this off for so long. I really wanted to make a big production of it. And, of course, here I am doing this guerrilla style the night before I have like a long class tomorrow. And I'm in my parents' room right now. They're downstairs sleeping, and I'm trying to do this and not be super loud, so I can't do kind of craziness here. But that's just life. You can only do so much. And so, like I say, Brooks really, really made me want to read the next book and go into it. And so I just couldn't help it, and then I did. And you will too. You'll want to read that book immediately. Now, I'll say this. Miles, I'm just going to call him Miles. Miles really does a good job. Like I said, I've never heard of the man before. And usually, if I haven't heard of somebody, I look them up. Excuse me. Very dry now. But I did not do that with him. So I don't know how much experience he has. He does a really good job with the characters, though. Especially the female, the adventurer that no one wants to come near. He does an amazing job with her and her character and the way that she speaks. And the hurt that comes across from the first person that Fred encounters, also, it kind of sings out. So you kind of get a good idea for, who he is and what he's like. And, of course, you have Fred's naive person just coming out loud and clear because, Miles does play him, not stupid, but just kind of lost, and it works so well. And there's a fine line. It's like he's not Forrest Gump, but he could have become Forrest Gump if he had done it wrong, because he could have come across that way, and I don't think it was what Brooks meant when he was writing this. I think that Miles really nailed the character in that concept, because, like I said, it could have gone bad real quick, with him, don't go on adventures without me, Jenny, that sort of stuff. And it didn't work that way. Miles reeled the character in, made him a lost little boy, which is exactly what he is. And it works so much better than what I think 99% of narrators would do out there. So he really does a good job. For me, this was an 8.4 star book. Like I say, I think it was a reinvention of the genre. I probably should say 8.5, but my spirit says 8.4. This was like a really great first book for Brooks for me. And I know that's not his first novel. I think he had a Station Core book out first. That was his first book or something, or there was another one with the trolls. But for me, this was my first encounter, and I don't know what the other books are like. I don't want to go into it. But for a first encounter, this was like a really good introduction to the man, because he is on par, like I say, with Logue and Kraut, dungeon-wise. And I mean, as many books as he's put out, I mean, if you think about it, Dakota Kraut only has 5 or 6 Divine Dungeon books, and Jeffrey Falcon Logue only has, so many Slime Dungeon books. He's got just about as many as them, and each one of those are just part of a series. And the one I'm really looking forward to is his horror book, because I'm a horror fanatic. So, again, this is like an 8.4 star book for me, but I think that it's a fun reinvention and rethinking of the genre, and you don't get to see that very often. So, kudos to him for thinking outside of the box. He went outside the paradigm, and yeah, I know it's not paradigm, it's paradigm. I know it's a paradigm, but paradigm sounds better. It's like what kids in high school go, what's a paradigm? I like that a lot better. So I have to say that stuff just to be stupid sometimes. But yeah, he had to go outside the paradigm or the paradigm, and it works because he gave it some thought and put a lot of energy into it, and he didn't just gloss over things. Every single event that occurs in that story occurs with a purpose. Every single event, whether it's him, who he meets, or how they meet, or whatever, there is a plan behind every action. So I give him a lot of credit for that. Brooks really kind of blew me away, and Miles did a really good job. So it's a good book. Go out and get it. Well, folks, I hope you've enjoyed the Dungeon Special for this episode. I worked really hard on nothing at all here. I did this as fast as I could and tried to get this out to you just so you had something. I know I could not do it last week. Again, my life is still a little hectic. I just do not have time for things that I usually do, including family and friends, and this is just one of those projects that it aggravates my wife that I do this sometimes, but I still definitely want to get this done for you all. It's important to me, and I like doing it. And I've had some of these books for a long time to review, so I have done my best to be fair and honest, and I hope you've enjoyed it. As always, thank you for listening or watching, and you can always leave comments down below and find us on a multitude of places. I think you've heard me say it 100 times by now, but Facebook, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Play, iTunes. There's a whole bunch of places you can look for us. So, for now, my name is Ray. Please keep listening.